The air over the Tunisian desert in 1943 was thick with the acrid scent of burning steel and diesel. What remained of the American 1st Armored Division was scattered near Sidi Bouzid, broken and abandoned after the devastating Battle of Kasserine Pass. Rommel's Afrika Korps had, with brutal efficiency, torn through the inexperienced American lines. Amidst the chaos, a small group of German mechanics from Schwer Panzerabteilung 501 found not a victory to celebrate, but a mystery to unravel. Private First Class Hans Mueller, a machinist from Stuttgart who once repaired Daimler-Benz cars, now crawled across the North African sand toward an abandoned American tank. It sat awkwardly, one track thrown by a mine. The white star on its olive-drab hull was still visible beneath a coat of dust. The crew had fled, leaving behind not just a tank, but a functioning machine ripe for study. The tank was an M4A1 Sherman, named War Daddy II, belonging to the 1st Armored Regiment. Maintenance logs revealed it had traveled thousands of combat miles. Muller's commanding officer, Hauptmann Werner Kessler, ordered it secured. This tank wasn't for parts or immediate German service. It was to be shipped, whole and operational, back to Germany. The order, coming directly from Berlin, reflected a deep curiosity about what the Americans had built. The journey to Germany was weeks long, across the Mediterranean, through Italy, and finally into the heart of the Reich. The Sherman's destination was Kummersdorf, a sprawling military proving ground hidden in the pine forests south of Berlin. Kummersdorf was a laboratory, not a factory. Since the 1870s, it had been a testing ground for artillery, rockets, and experimental weapons. Here, captured enemy equipment from every front. Soviet T-34s, British Matildas, French Renaults was dissected. But in the spring of 1943, an American medium tank was something entirely new. Chief Engineer Oberingenieur Friedrich Hahn, a methodical man with wire-rimmed glasses and an ever-present leather-bound journal, led the evaluation. When War Daddy II rolled off the transport, Hahn circled it slowly, silently. His team watched, equally unimpressed. The tank looked unremarkable. A boxy hull, a rounded turret, a 75mm gun that was adequate but not fearsome, and armor that seemed only thick enough for small-caliber fire. Compared to the elegant engineering of a Panther, it looked crude. The German engineers, expecting something to explain their struggles in North Africa, were underwhelmed. Then, they opened the engine compartment. The Continental R975 radial engine powering the Sherman wasn't a purpose-built tank motor. It was an aircraft engine, a Wright aeronautical design from the late 1920s, adapted for military use. The Americans hadn't designed a new engine. They had simply taken an existing, reliable one and installed it by the tens of thousands. The R975 was air-cooled, eliminating radiators, coolant lines, and the risk of a punctured water jacket stranding a tank. It produced 400 horsepower and could be serviced by any mechanic familiar with tractors or trucks. Hahn's team stared at the almost primitive machinery inside. German Maybach engines, marvels of precision engineering, were liquid-cooled and required specialized tools, factory-trained mechanics, and a constant supply of temperature-controlled coolant. But one component made Hahn stop writing and simply stare. A metal cylinder, roughly the size of a large cooking pot, connected to the engine's air intake. It was painted olive drab, with a decal reading Oil Bath Air Cleaner and maintenance instructions in English. Hahn had never seen anything like it. He ordered its immediate removal for analysis. The oil bath air cleaner was not complex. Its simplicity was its genius. Air entered the top, was drawn downward toward a reservoir of motor oil, then reversed direction sharply upward. Dust particles, too heavy to make the turn, plunged into the oil and were trapped. Cleaned air passed through an oil-wetted mesh filter into the carburetor. The result? Air almost completely free of contaminants, even in the harshest desert conditions. Hans spent an hour in the workshop, turning the disassembled air cleaner in his hands. His notes, preserved in German military archives, described the device as elegantly crude and representative of an engineering philosophy fundamentally different from Germany's. While German engineers built engines resistant to dust, Americans built systems to remove dust before it caused harm. The German solution was complexity. The American, prevention. This discovery's implications were profound. Han knew German tanks in North Africa suffered catastrophic engine failures from fine sand, infiltrating inadequate felt filters. Panzer IIIs and IVs broke down after mere hundreds of kilometers. Silica particles acted like microscopic sandpaper, scoring cylinder walls and piston rings, leading to skyrocketing oil consumption, compression loss, and clogged crankshaft housings. German dry felt filters, designed for European roads, failed utterly in the Sahara. Field commanders' pleas for better solutions yielded slow, complex, and inadequate responses. The Americans had solved it with a pot of oil and clever baffles. Over subsequent weeks, Han's team exhaustively tested War Daddy 2. They drove it until its tracks wore smooth, measuring fuel consumption, oil usage, and mechanical wear. Compared to a control Panzer IV, the Sherman could travel nearly 3,000 kilometers before a major engine overhaul. The Panzer IV needed attention after 1,500 kilometers under ideal conditions. The new Panther's sophisticated Maybach HL 230 engine barely lasted 1,000 kilometers, and its transmission's final drives failed after only 150 kilometers cross-country. The most damning finding was not about a single component, but the entire design philosophy. When a Sherman broke down, any soldier with basic mechanical training could diagnose it. The engine was accessible, parts standardized, and a transmission could be swapped in hours with a field repair kit. A broken Panther required a depot-level facility with specialized equipment and factory-trained technicians. The Germans built tanks for the factory. The Americans built them for the battlefield. Han's report, circulated to the highest levels of German command, met predictable resistance. No one wanted to hear that American engineering was superior. The report was filed, its recommendations ignored. By 1944, German armored unit operational readiness dropped below 50%. Not from enemy fire, but mechanical failure. Panthers were abandoned with seized transmissions. Tigers were blown up by their own crews for lack of towing capability. Meanwhile, the Sherman kept rolling. 49,000 were built between 1942 and 1945. They weren't the best tanks by technical measure. Their armor was thin, guns adequate, but not fearsome, and they burned terrifyingly when hit, earning the nickname Ronson. But they ran. They started in the morning and ran all day. They crossed deserts, mountains, and frozen rivers, repaired in farmyards by mechanics who had been salesmen months earlier. And at the heart of each was a simple metal cylinder filled with oil, quietly removing the dust that would have killed a German engine. The tragedy of Kummersdorf was not failure to learn, but learning too late and changing too little. Institutional inertia in the German military-industrial complex was too great. Engineers raising reliability concerns were told to focus on firepower and armor. Factories that could have produced simpler, robust tanks were tooled for fewer, more complicated machines that spent more time in repair shops than on the battlefield. The German philosophy of quick victories left no plan for a long war of attrition, and their tanks reflected it. War Daddy II remained at Kummersdorf until the war's final days. In April 1945, as Soviets neared Berlin, the proving ground was evacuated. Some vehicles were used in a last-ditch combat unit, others destroyed. The Sherman's fate is uncertain. Some historians believe it fought south of Kummersdorf, others that it was simply abandoned. But War Daddy II's lessons outlived the war. The oil bath air cleaner became standard military equipment for decades. The principle of designing for field maintenance, not factory perfection, became a cornerstone of American military engineering. The Sherman, often derided, earned a reputation among those who fought in them as the most reliable tracked vehicle of the war. The Sherman's designers weren't geniuses, but practical engineers who understood a broken tank is worthless, regardless of gun or armor. They built a machine fixable by ordinary soldiers in extraordinary circumstances. A machine that could breathe in the desert and run in the snow. A machine that won a war not through superiority, but sufficiency. Good enough, and there when it mattered. In Kummersdorf's archives, among declassified documents, a single sheet bears Friedrich Hahn's signature. A June 1943 requisition for oil bath air cleaner development for German tanks. Approved, production was slated for early 1945. By then, factories were rubble, tanks burning hulks. The Germans knew, they understood, but they ran out of time. Somewhere in Brandenburg's forests, beneath decades of fallen leaves, the ghost of War Daddy II still holds the secret its enemies discovered too late. Sometimes the most important innovations aren't those that make a machine more powerful, but those that keep it running when the world tries to tear it apart. The dust still blows across Kummersdorf, but now nothing is left to filter it.